probably one of the best winter oilseed rape years that we've had. I suppose 22, we had a really good year. I think the average was probably close on 2 tons to the acre there. Most growers that you're talking to are talking about 2 and a bit with it. I've heard rape yields of up to 2.5 and even a shade with it in one case. So yeah, it's been a really good year. Weather pattern's been excellent for oilseed rape, and price wise as well, relative to cereals is good. So look, it will be hopefully a profitable crop for growers this year.
It's been one of the earliest harvests in recent years, and although it's only early August, some farmers are almost finished all of their combining, with beans being the exception. Not only have many fields been harvested and cleared of straw, but a lot are already cultivated with cover crops sown. You're listening to the latest episode of the Tillage Edge with me, Michael Hennessy. We would really appreciate it if you could listen, follow and give us a review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts from. I'm delighted to be joined by John Brophy, a Teagasc Tillage Advisor in North Kildare, and Ciaran Collins, a Teagasc Tillage Specialist, to chat about the harvest in their areas and how it compares to other years. Ciaran, just want to come to you first. Ciaran, how's the harvest going down south?
Great progress really. We've had a great run really, weather-wise, and farmers are getting through the work very well. Small blip there at the weekend, I suppose Sunday night there, so there was a bit of rain. Slowed things down on Monday. There wasn't a whole lot cut on Monday, I suppose, but people are back at it Tuesday and on. And I think the forecast is maybe reasonable for the rest of the week, maybe small blip, but no, great progress being made. Obviously winter barley is done, rape's done, winter wheat is well into being done at this stage, and there's massive progress made on spring barley as well. As a matter of fact, I think that some farmers are almost nearly waiting for some of those later ones to come ripe, that they're normally we're the other way around, that where crops are nearly overripe or starting to break down. But this year, I think lads are just getting it on the money the whole time. They're nearly waiting for crops like.
So in the general sense, Ciaran, are we well over halfway then?
Yeah. Certainly, yeah.
Okay.
It'll be, I think if this week will stay dry, it certainly won't be finished or far from it at the weekend, but it'll be manageable after that, I think.
Okay. John, coming to you, same question. How's it going up towards your part of the world and maybe further up towards the northeast?
Yeah, it looks similar again, Michael. I suppose we're well over halfway through. Winter barleys are done. I suppose spring barley maybe 3/4 way through it. Maybe some farmers are finished their spring barley, especially maybe any of the malting barley buys. They're finished on the barley at this stage. Oats, lads are getting through them there nicely as well. I'd say most of the oats are done. Wheats, I'd say lads are only getting into it now up our end of the country on the wheats. And you'd notice a difference there even after the weekend. Lads were getting going on wheat there yesterday evening. So I'd imagine the next few days now we'll take a good chunk of that out of it now as well.
Okay.
So lads are very happy with progress at the minute. Like the weather has been good, and an odd wet day here or there, lads are glad to get it, just to sit back and kind of get things fixed up and go again.
That's it, get the combine greased and those little bits and pieces they want to fix up, get it done and all that kind of thing.
Yes, the merchants are damn glad of the wet day really. I think, the capacity that we have now to harvest crops. There's mountains of grain filling yards, and I think this year especially because you had a number of crops coming together, so I think that's been a big factor. But look, thankfully the moistures have been kind of reasonably, and grain is storing well, I suppose.
That's true, and just to comment on that, it was in one of the merchants' yards, and there was a mountain of wheat nearly coming out the gate. And they were also trying to deal with barley, trying to deal with oats. When I was there, some peas arrived in, and not to mention the rye, I think, was in the corner as well. So in fairness to the merchant, they had a bit of a job on their hands to get it going. Look, we might circle back just a little bit, maybe back to some of the yields, and it's probably a better idea of where some of the yields are at the moment. Maybe towards maybe winter barley, Ciaran. What are you hearing around the average yields, maybe tops and bottoms as well in terms of winter barley down your side of the world?
The majority of it is sort of fitting into a range from sort of that 3.5 to 4. I think most of it is fitting into that. We did have some exceptionally good crops that went over the 4. And then obviously, look, you're going 3 and 3.5. But I would say put an average is hard, but My guess would be somewhere around three quarters. I'd say that'd be my guess. But a couple of things stick out, and I suppose they always do with winter barley. The first one is rotation. You know, um, there's a bit more of a trend down this side of the world to put in winter barley as a first crop after break, and that certainly pays dividends. You know, you can see that versus the second crop or where you're out in rotation. That's worth a lot of yield. You know, can be worth up to half a ton. I'm seeing around the place. Secondly, soil fertility, particularly where organic manures are used. I think that's always a factor. I know we always speak about it, but look, it seems to impact on winter barley a little bit more than other crops, in my opinion. And the third one is around the BYDB tolerant varieties. That's been just a super addition, and I think it's sort of hard in some ways not to grow a variety now that has that, or certainly what you saw first anyway. And I think that is a factor in some of the better yields as well, you know.
So, Kieran, I suppose on average, winter barley hasn't performed particularly well, maybe over the last 5 or 6 years. We're well over that 5, 6 year average, are we?
We certainly are. I can't remember off the top of my head, somewhere around 3.5, I'd say is probably where we are. Maybe even slightly below it on a 5 year average. So we're certainly above it this year anyway. Yeah, certainly.
Okay. John, you've a bit of heavier ground, maybe up to towards your part of the world. Is our yields similar, or are they any better than that?
For the most part, yields are definitely similar, like 3.7, 3.8 is what most lads are reporting. Probably some of the better crops, we're probably up around maybe 4.2. Maybe 4.3 on some of the better crops, maybe the heavier soil and maybe as Ciaran was saying there, maybe fertility and organic matter being used to get those better crops.
And John, did you hear anything much about the differential maybe in terms of hectolitre weight between the 6 rows and the 2 rows? Is there any much differences there? Did you hear, or did 6 rows do really well anyway?
I haven't really heard much on it. I think they're kind of similar, but I'd say the 2 rows probably have the edge there on the bushel weights. I mean, lads are kind of report maybe in around the 65, 66 kph, maybe a little bit higher in some instances.
Okay,
But
doing really well.
that seems to be an average from what I'm hearing anyway. Yeah.
Okay. Then my part of the world, then around Carlow direction, I'm hearing some great yields for winter wheat, John. A lot of guys sort of well north of 4 tons to the acre, and even better yields being talked about in the pub. Whether they're not, I'm not sure, but better yields certainly. How I know you mentioned earlier you're only really getting into wheat up your part of the world, but what's the initial yields looking like?
I suppose, look, lads, they're talking about maybe 4.2 to 4.5 ton there on wheats there so far. I'd say as we get into wheats, that's going to climb. Because lads are only starting at there now. But as I said, you could see the difference there after the weekend that lads are getting going in fields. So I'd say over the next few days, I'll probably hear more solid yields on the wheats, like some of those at the 4.2 to 4.5 probably would have been early crops, and crops that
Okay.
just come in early as well.
Not so shabby though, just the same. Pretty good yields
No, no, they're
nonetheless.
still good yields, and as I say, I'd be hoping to hear maybe of a higher yields as we get more into the wheat harvest.
And Kieran, down your way, how's it looking?
Yeah, I'd be sort of hearing similar yields to what you spoke about there. I would say again the majority is somewhere in the range of between 4 and 4.5. Now, not to be greedy, but certainly 6, 8 weeks ago, I would have thought that some of the winter wheat crops I was looking at were going to hit sort of real the high notes, you know. But there's no doubt that the drought in the last, not even call it drought, but certainly the dryness took some of the shine off of those crops. Now they're still yielding well, but I think they possibly had more potential a few weeks ago, you know. But that's just a factor, I think, of the dry weather.
Yeah, they came in pretty fast, but there must be great straw yields. I don't know, because I mean, in fairness, there was great canopies really for the most part. I mean, disease levels, I suppose, in general, Kieran, were relatively low. Maybe I know we had a bit of a scare with yellow rust and bits and pieces, but there must be decent straw levels
I
out
think
there,
there
right?
is, yeah. I haven't got any accurate kind of figures, but like from looking at crops in it, I would say straw yields should be reasonably good. And you mentioned disease, like normally down south when you get a low septoria, or when septoria is well controlled, which it generally was this year, that normally kind of will get you good yields. While we did have some yellow rust, and certainly not as much as say John's area, but anything that was there, to be fair, I think was well controlled.
Is it a bit too early to pick out any varieties, Kieran, to say one is better or significantly worse than the other?
It is, I suppose, look, we were very restricted, probably Champion and Graham was, nearly everything every crop you went into this year, I think what I would be keeping a sharp eye on is the department trials this year. There is some very nice new material coming through, and I think that's one for maybe further down the road, but certainly keep an eye on that because there is some good material coming through, to be fair.
Winter oilseed rape, Kieran, from what I'm hearing, is doing extremely well. Certainly around Carlow, a lot of people are telling me 2 tons is nearly the average. Is that the case further south?
Yeah, we've from what I can gather, we're having probably one of the best winter oilseed rape years that we've had. I suppose 22 we had a really good year. I think the average was probably close on 2 tons to the acre there. Most growers that you're talking to are talking about two and a bit with it. I've heard rape yields of up to 2.5 and even a shade with it in one case. So yeah, it's been a really good year. Weather pattern's been excellent for oilseed rape, really, And price wise as well, relative to cereals is good. So look, it will be hopefully a profitable crop for growers this year.
Similar story, John, up your parts of neck of the woods, up in Kildare and a bit further afield.
Yeah, definitely looks similar story again. Like lads are reporting the two plus tons. Moistures are very good then as well. I know maybe I've heard maybe one or two lads report maybe 1.8, 1.9, but moistures are down at 9.5%, like in those scenarios. And in general, probably I'm hearing maybe 10, 11, 12% moistures as well. So it was an easy harvest and moistures were good. So like there was no issues. And lads were very happy with rape at the minute. Yeah.
I suppose it's a pity we're just down on acreage in terms of winter oilseed rape this year. Probably, the fallout from the poor year the previous year is just the way it works out. But look, oilseed rape, as far as I can see, John and Kieran, has been probably one of the most consistent crops over the last 5 years. I mean, bar almost any crop, I'd say, in terms of yield, but also in terms of margin.
If you look at the CSO yield average, I think about 4.5 is the average, but it's rock solid in terms of its consistency. You'll get an odd year it'll dip below it, and a year like this where it'll go above it. But I think the breeding technology is absolutely fabulous. In terms of pod shatter resistance, you can take it all the way through the varieties. And that makes a big difference, like a security there, like.
Just to finish off on the winter crops, then, pretty much all the winter oats, Kieran, are finished, I suppose, at this stage. Did they hold up as well as everything else?
Yeah, John might have a better handle on it than me now because the area of winter oats down south would be relatively small. What I'm hearing is sort of in certainly over 3.5, that 3.6, 3.7 bracket. And just on the spring oats, as you mentioned, oats, that some of that, even it's hard to believe it's only the 6th of August we're recording here, and some of that's been cut already, so and yields of that are good. They're certainly over 3 anyway, and a bit with it in cases. So a good year yield wise, maybe not so much on the price and the market side of it, but I think there's good yields out there, yeah.
John, a comment from you on the oats?
Yeah, looks similar. I suppose yields might be a little bit stronger up our neck of the woods. Like lads are reporting 4 ton to the acre there on it.
Oh.
Moistures are good. KPHs are coming back fairly good as well. So, oats has been fairly consistent, strangely, for the last couple of years. Like lads have been getting them sort of yields for the last maybe 3 years, despite
Yeah.
despite the different weather patterns that we've had. And it's proven to be a good crop and probably a good break crop. Just to pay, maybe the prices are a little bit on the weaker side.
Okay, John, just to finish up then in terms of some of the spring barleys, you mentioned earlier around the malt and barley, a lot of them were kind of finished. What are you hearing around that side of the house?
Yeah, look, I'm hearing around the 3.2, 3.3 tons on malt and barley. Moisture's around 16%. I suppose proteins are fairly strong, around over the 11%, and maybe looking as if they're kind of getting a little bit higher as we get further into the harvest. That's kind of where it's going at the minute. But look, in fairness, most of it is going. It is passing, so most of it is going for brewing there at the minute. Yeah.
So most guys are getting what they wanted in the contract, and contracts are being filled, even though some of them are a good bit lower than maybe other years.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So
And Kieran, down your side of the house, yields are pretty good.
I've a different story on proteins. I'd say more lower proteins down my way. Maybe that's just a factor of soil type and maybe the year that's in it with reasonably good yields as well. I'm hearing kind of a lot of it falling into that 8-9 bracket, in terms of protein. Yield wise, again, like John is good with a cautionary tail, I suppose. Look, 3 ton seems to be easily achievable, and a lot of crops doing over that. I suppose we've sort of been kind of all year talking about the tail end to spring barley, which obviously these crops aren't cut yet. So you had some crops that maybe didn't have the nitrogen out before we got the rain. They definitely suffered when you were walking them during the year. There was crops that were sown that got heavy rain after, particularly in the southeast around the Wexford area, and they suffered. So I'd be sort of cautious on winter barley yields a while, but so far so good. But there might be a bit of a tail to it,
I was looking at some crops down in the southeast you were talking about there, and some were resown, and some of the later sown stuff, as far as I was seeing there, have they come up well. Then there was that dry spell, but then they got a big blast of growth afterwards, and a lot of those are now brackled and fairly well lodged, kind of brackled over themselves at least anyway. So, and talking to some of the malt and barley guys in the southeast, were saying that the protein seem to be rising, the screening seem to be rising, so it's not going the way you'd like it, because some of them were kind of on the edge anyways, if you know what I mean. But as you say, certainly around here, Ciaran, a lot of farmers have filled their contracts. They seem to get a tail of higher proteins on some side of it and lower proteins as well. So there's a bit of a tail all round. Just maybe to finish up, Ciaran, on everything. In terms of beans, they're probably the last crop some guys have to harvest. Some people are finished, certainly up around here at least anyways. They seem to have held on extremely well this year in terms of their colour. What do you think of them?
Yeah, the few crops I've been into lately seem to have reasonably good pod numbers. Excuse me. Now, I suppose there's 2 things. We've had dry weather, and obviously we know that will have a detrimental effect on bean yield. However, I think the majority of crops had enough moisture during that critical sort of pod flowering stroke pod formation timing. Hence, we have a reasonable number of pods. I wouldn't be certainly expecting any bumper yields on beans, but I think on average they look okay, for the year that's in it, I suppose. Look, you never know until you get in there and seed size, and there's a bit to go in it, but I think not a 2018 anyway, I suppose I'd put you like that,
Ciaran, just a very last little bit of advice you might give to growers maybe over the next couple of weeks. A lot of cover crops going in at the moment. Any do's or don'ts in that?
One thing I would notice, as you say, there is a lot going in at the moment, and the EIP scheme obviously is a big factor, and acres there, plus that people have got straw cleared, and there is cover crops going in. It's nearly hard to get the seed. I suppose just the one thing on that one, and we're always watching on costs in relation to cover crops, but I think it might be a good year to roll them, just fly up and down the field with the roller, just hold in whatever bit of moisture is there. I suppose you would be a little bit concerned there that, we have dry soils at the moment and that they mightn't strike very well. So just to hold that bit of moisture if possible,
Okay. One very, very final thing here, and just to ask you, again, I was traveling around, a good bit around Wexford and Laois over the last week or 10 days, and I was surprised the amount of wild oats and other grass weeds that were popping out. Before the harvest is finished, is there anything growers can do around those weeds?
Yeah, I mean, it's not too late to get a few samples and get them tested for resistance. So like if you've sprayed them with a herbicide and they're still there, you might be able to explain it for whatever reason. But like if you're finding it difficult to explain it, you're up on the combine, if you could get someone to get a sample, we have a facility here in Oak Park to get them tested for herbicide resistance, it might be worth doing, the sample size isn't huge, maybe the equivalent of a pint glass of seed, whatever weeds you have. It doesn't have to be wild oats. It can be a broadleaf weed. It can be any other grass weed, but maybe get a sample. It might be worth doing it if you have time there during the harvest, because seeing it from the combine obviously is the best place you're going to see it from. So it might be a very worthwhile exercise, for future planning.
Sure, jump down in 10 minutes of hand shot and you probably get as much as you want, I'd say. Okay, listen, thanks very much, guys. That's all we have for today. Ciaran, thanks very much, and John, thanks very much for joining us. And listen, we'll chat to you again maybe towards the end of the harvest, just to maybe do a bit of a wrap up and kind of see what way yields have ended up. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Michael.
Okay, thank you.
So that's it for today, and my thanks to John and Ciaran for joining me on the podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, then recommend it to a friend or colleague. And as always, rate, review and follow on Apple or Spotify so you never miss an episode. And for more information, go to teagasc.ie. I'm Michael Hennessy. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week with more tillage news and advice.